All right, so we're in the middle of a series called Freeway, where we're looking at experiencing freedom in life. And the first week I asked a question. I want us to revisit that question just real quick. The question, the question is this: just think about what are the things that you're dreaming about. So think about when you go to bed at night. Think about when you're stuck in traffic. Think about when you're in a meeting and you're not totally engaged, and you start to dream a little bit. What are those things then that you're dreaming about? Now, you don't have to tell anybody, but I just want you to think about this. Like, is the thing or are the things that you're dreaming about, do they provide you with an escape from the reality that you're currently experiencing? So do your dreams provide you an escape from the reality that you're currently experiencing? Now, if the answer is yes, I would say that you're not living as a free person, because the free person would not have to dream of an escape from his or her current reality. Now, we know that there's many things that are going to keep us as living as not free. The first week we looked at a couple of them. We looked at just the busyness that some of us have, and we looked at the distractions that exist in life today. Now, I'd say that, and some of you probably really related to this, because this may be the picture of your current life. We can't experience freedom because we're so busy. We're so distracted that we can't focus on who God wants us to be and what God wants us to do, because we don't have time, because we don't have that focus. Now, last week we looked at comparison. Now, I'll stick to what I said last week. Like, we're not going to be free until we can break this tyranny of always comparing ourselves to who other people are. Now, in the comparison game, we're always going to lose. Now, in the short term, we might be able to, pull it off for a little bit, but we're always going to find someone who's richer than us, who's younger, who has a relationship that we want, or the type of relationship that we want, who has a certain skill that we want. They live in a certain house that we would love to have. So short term, we're usually going to lose, and long term, we're always going to lose, because at the end of our days, there's always going to be someone who is younger and healthier and more alive than what we are. So we know that freedom can't be experienced until we can break this tyranny of comparison. Now, today we continue, and we look at forgiveness. Now, I would say you could add up week 1 and week 2, and you could multiply those by like 2 or 3. And you're not even going to come close to what we're going to talk about today. I don't think that we can experience freedom in life until we have experienced forgiveness in life. I'm talking about relationships that we have with other people, but also the relationship that we have with God, and accepting the forgiveness that He gives us so that we can ultimately forgive ourselves. We cannot live as free today until we can break the chains from our past. Now, it's really important to know, there's certain things that forgiveness is not. And you just have to understand, I think when we talk about forgiveness, we have this cultural understanding of what it is, but we're going to talk about the biblical type of forgiveness this morning. So, forgiveness, number one, it's not primarily a gift for the offending party. So I want you to hear that right off the bat. Forgiveness is not primarily a gift to the person who has hurt you. Forgiveness is ultimately God's gift to you that we can accept and embrace for ourselves. Now, the alternative to unforgiveness is carrying around a bunch of bitterness and brokenness. And it works like this. If someone has hurt you in the past, whether it was 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, if we don't forgive that person, what happens in our life is we allow them to keep hurting us. So they've hurt us once. That was their thing. And now they're continuing to hurt us, but that becomes our thing after a while. Because eventually we have to say, okay, I'm going to get past this. I'm going to forgive this person because I care about my future too much. So I want you to hear that forgiveness is primarily not for the offending party. Forgiveness is for us. Forgiveness sets the forgiver free and allows us to live into the future that God wants for us. Now, the next thing you need to know about forgiveness is not a one-time event. You just don't look at someone and say, okay, I forgive you. especially if there's like some type of deep hurt. You don't look at them, or you don't send them a message or write them a letter or do whatever and say, okay, it's done, I forgive you, it's over. It's not a one-time event. It doesn't work like that. Healing takes time. So forgiveness, it's going to be more like this. You're gonna see things that trigger memories. You're gonna hear things that are gonna rehash the old pain. And that's just the way life works. So then forgiveness is not an event, it becomes a process or a journey that we take. I think another one we gotta just get out there is forgiveness is not forgetting. They're just not the same. Whoever said forgive and forget, they were theologically, emotionally, relationally, psychologically wrong. You don't do that. You've been hurt bad enough that you're not going to forget some of the things that have happened to you. And I would even say that's not necessarily a bad thing, because what that's going to do is protect you in the future from having it happen again. Forgiveness is not allowing the unforgettable past pain to ruin our present today and our future tomorrow. Remembering, however, can help us learn from the past and protect us in the future. Number 4, forgiveness is not an act of weakness. So if anyone ever tells you that forgiveness is for the weak, they're wrong, because forgiveness is for the strong. Forgiving someone else is an exceptional act of strength that mainly happens through the grace and the power of God working in individuals. Forgiveness is not easy, forgiveness is tough, but I'll tell you this, anything that's rewarding in life is pretty challenging, isn't it? The best things in life, that they're tough, but we do them. Number 5, forgiveness is not permission to continue a self-destructive behavior. Right before this text, they asked Jesus how many times you should forgive, and Jesus says you should forgive 70 times 7 times. So Jesus, he's using metaphor and hyperbole here, but Jesus is saying that forgiveness is not even unlimited like this. You got to draw the line somewhere. Forgiveness is not enabling a self-destructive behavior. Forgiveness is not letting someone off the hook who's going to continue to hurt themselves and hurt other people. For forgiveness, there's got to be accountability. When we talk about forgiveness, I think sometimes forgiveness loves so much. I think that forgiveness loves so much that it has to say no. And I think forgiveness sometimes loves so much that it has to say goodbye. I've been trying to teach my 7-year-old this. Forgiveness is not conditional. Those 4 letters in the middle, G-I-V-E, is forgiveness. It's not for earnness. So David will say, to me or Benny or Esther the dog or whoever has offended him, well, I'll forgive you if you go buy me some Biscoff at Walmart, and I'll forgive you if you give me $2, or I'll forgive you if you take me to Toys R Us so I can buy some. No, that's not forgiveness. That's like a contract between 2 people. Forgiveness, it's grace. It cannot be earned. It can only be given. You got to hear this one too. Forgiveness, it doesn't necessarily mean a fully restored relationship. A restored relationship takes 2 parties. Forgiveness only takes 1 party. You can only be responsible for your part. Sometimes forgiveness will equal a fully restored relationship. I'll say that sometimes forgiveness can even equal a stronger relationship. But sometimes forgiveness means the relationship is over. Sometimes forgiveness means you say something like this: okay, you've hurt me. You really messed me up. You know that? But I'm not going to let you continue to hurt me. I'm not going to let you continue to mess me up. I don't know if we can move forward. I'm going to move forward. If there's some reconciliation in the future, maybe we'll do that. But you can forgive without being in a fully restored relationship. Now, I want to go to what Jesus says about forgiveness. We find this in Matthew chapter 18. This is the verse that was read to us a little bit ago. Now here Jesus is telling a parable. He's telling a ton of parables at these times, and he just tells all these stories because Jesus is convinced that these stories communicate truth better than any fact could. So he talks about this story. He says, therefore, in Matthew chapter 18, verse 23, therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to a king who decided to bring his accounts up to date with servants who had borrowed money from him. So you just got to look at those first few words there, okay? Therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared to. So Jesus says, this is real life. Like fully functioning life in this world, this is what it looks like. Worship and eternity, this is what it's looked like. This is what the kingdom of heaven looks like. In verse 24, he says, in the process, one of his debtors was brought in who owed him millions of dollars. So just put yourself in this guy's shoes. He probably makes, 50, 60, 70,000 a year or something like that. And he owes this king millions of dollars. So he's going to the king and he owes him all this money and he couldn't pay. So his master ordered that he be sold along with his wife, his children, and everything he owned to pay the debt. Now I just want you to put yourself in that guy's shoes just for a second, okay? Let's just say that you make $50,000 a year, and let's say that you owe somebody $4 million. It's pretty hopeless at that point, isn't it? You're going to spend your rest of your life trying to pay off this debt, and you're not even going to put a dent in it. That's what this guy is going through. Now, in addition to this, his wife and his kids are suffering because of his debt. Now, this is just reality. This is real life here. When one of us suffers, those who love us, they suffer as well. So he's got the guilt of these people that he loves the most suffering because of his debt. Now, in verse 26, he says, but the man, I think this is probably what a lot of us would have done. But the man fell down before his master and begged, please be patient with me. I'll pay it all. Now, we can't blame him for doing that. It's he gets down and says, I'm going to pay this off. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to work the rest of my life. I'm going to pay it. Don't take the kids. Don't take the wife. Just let me pay this thing off. Now, we see grace embodied and personified in Christ in verse 27. Then the master was filled with pity for him, and he released him and forgave his debt. Now, this is amazing. Now, this is a parable. And when Jesus talks about parable, he's using hyperbole and metaphor here. So everything in this parable is symbolic of something for us. So the kingdom of heaven, that is our life today, as it could be and as it should be. The king, guess who that is? That would be God. The man who owes the money, guess who that is? That's us. The money in the story is our sin. So think about this. All the things that you've done, everything. From the time you're 2 years old and you stole a lollipop from your kid brother or kid sister, to today. When you gossiped or when you took something that wasn't yours, or you said something you shouldn't have said, or you did something you shouldn't have done, or you didn't do something you should. Everything, all of it together. That's what we owe the king. Now, the king says to you, and the king says to me, that you're released. You're released from bondage to freedom. You are forgiven. The debt is forgiven. You are no longer, going to have to repay this. Now, this is good news, isn't it? Now, if you believe this, and if you can embrace it, and if you can live it out, this is powerful, powerful good news. Now, the interesting thing about this parable is Jesus doesn't just stop there. Now let's look at verse 28. Listen to his first word. The first word is but. Have you ever had one of those conversations where it's going really well and then that word but comes in there? Is there a more despised word in the English language than but? It's not good and it's not good here. But when the man left the king, he went to a fellow servant who owed him a few $1,000s. His servant fell down, a few $1,000s. He grabbed him by the throat. He's going this guy, and he's just forgiven of all this millions of dollars. And now all of a sudden, he's strangling this guy that owes him just a couple of $1,000s, and he demanded instant payment. His fellow servant fell down before him and begged for a little bit more time. Be patient with me and I'll pay it, he pleaded. But the creditor, the man who was just forgiven, couldn't wait. He had the man arrested and put in prison until the debt could be paid in full. So what's your response to this guy right now? Are you pretty favorable toward this man? There is not one of us in this room that is terribly thrilled about this guy, are we? I mean, he's just been forgiven of millions of dollars. And now there's someone that owes him a couple $1,000s, and he's not willing to share any of that. You know, he strangles this guy, he demands payment, he has him thrown in jail. Now, just like us, the people had a negative reaction when some of the other servants saw this in verse 31. They were very upset. They went to the king and told him everything that had happened. Then the king called the man who had forgiven and said, "You evil servant, you evil servant, I forgave you that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. You pleaded with me and I forgave you." And then, shouldn't you have mercy in verse 33 on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you? Then the angry king sent the man to prison to be tortured until he had paid his entire debt. That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from the heart. Now here, Jesus is making a passionate plea for people to live in right relationships with each other. That's what the plea is. He knows that it is best for the forgiver because the forgiver can let go of resentment and hurts and bitterness and brokenness and not be defined by our past. He knows that it is best for the forgiven because they can again look in the mirror and not be defined by their guilt. Again, it gives both parties in the relationship a glimpse of God's nature and God's character. Now here, it's easy to read this thing, and I think you're reading it wrong if you read it this way. Like, okay, I've got to forgive other people, or Jesus isn't going to forgive me. That's what happened here. And that's not the way Jesus tells this parable. Jesus starts off, he says, okay, you're forgiven. You are forgiven. Like everything, nothing else, everything. You're forgiven. Now, all I want you to do, and this is Jesus, all I want you to do is just share this with other people. You know, you've been blessed beyond belief, and everything that you've done is forgiven, and all you got to do is just share that. And Jesus believes that the forgiven becomes the forgiving. The forgiven doesn't let hurts from the past destroy their future. Now, Jesus makes no distinction here between the forgiveness of others and the forgiveness of self. Jesus makes no distinction between God's forgiveness and human forgiveness. It's all lumped into one thing. It's all the same. Now, these traveling companions are always going to be with each other. It's impossible for them to separate. Traveling companion number one is discovering, embracing, and living out the forgiveness that God gives to us. Traveling companion number two, then, is sharing that same forgiveness with others. Yeah, we don't forgive and earn God's forgiveness. We are given God's forgiveness, and then we share that forgiveness with others. That's how Jesus did it. Like, I think it's in Luke chapter 23, verse 34. There were people that killed Jesus. Like, he was breathing his last breaths. He was marching his last steps. And he prayed this prayer, and this prayer is unfathomable for most of us. But he prayed it anyway because of his nature and his character. And what Jesus said was simply a prayer to God for the men who killed him. Father, I think you guys know the rest, don't you? Forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. Yeah, that's forgiveness. You know, the Old Testament says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And I think that too many of us are living under the Old Testament rules. You know, if someone hurts us, we're going to hurt them back. You know, if we see some injustice, it's going to be taken care of. Now, that's very problematic after a while. You know, you're keeping score, you're keeping track. There's injustice and hurts and hatred, all of that. You don't want to live that way. And Jesus even says that. He says that in Matthew chapter 6, verse 12. When he prays the prayer that we pray every week, we're going to pray in a little bit, he says, forgive us our trespasses or forgive us our sins as we have forgiven those who have forgiven us. Now, what Jesus is saying here is, God has forgiven me, so I'm going to forgive you. Now, I looked at about 10 things that forgiveness was not. I just got 3 real quick of what forgiveness is. Number 1, forgiveness is possible. You can do this. You can accept and embrace and live out God's forgiveness for yourself. And if there's someone that has really messed you up, you can forgive them as well because it's possible. Paul says that we can do all things. Not just all things except, forgive people who have really messed us up. He says we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength. Forgiveness is grace. We haven't earned it. We can only receive it and give it out. And then forgiveness is a good idea. Now, why should we forgive? Now, you can talk like theologically. You can also talk like emotionally and psychologically about this as well. Like what forgiveness is, it's like unforgiveness in your life. Let's just say there's someone up in the top that like has hurt me or something like that. And here's what unforgiveness is like. Like I can have a boomerang, and this person has hurt me, and they're sleeping right now, and that's really offended me. So I'm gonna like throw this boomerang up and wake them up. But what happens to the boomerang? It's going to fly around in a circle, it's going to come back, and it's going to hit me in the head. That's what unforgiveness is like. It's not going to hurt the person that, who has offended us. We're the ones who are going to be really hurt. We're the ones who carry around the resentment. We're the ones who carry around the bitterness. We're the ones who carry around the anger. Bitterness keeps a detailed record of wrongs. Listen to what Paul says about love. It does what? It keeps no record of wrongs. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison, hoping that it kills the other person. Now, just 2 things. Like one is, what are we going to do about other people? Someone else has hurt you. Someone else has messed you up. You hear their name. You see their picture. You see something pop up on social media. You go to work and you see their office. You drive down the street and you see their house. Something's got to change. You can't do this forever. Like there's got to be some kind of forgiveness that happens, and maybe that means a restored relationship, but maybe it just means something like this. Like you say to them, like, I want you to know that you really hurt me. You said that thing to that person and it got back to him, and I trusted you and you broke that trust, and I want you to know I'm not going to, it's done, it's over. I'm not going to continue to carry this with me anymore. Like, the decision that you made in the past isn't going to limit or prohibit my future, so I forgive you. Maybe that's what forgiveness looks like, and you do the absolute best that you can do to forgive that person. Jesus, he tells us how to do this in Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 through 45. He says, you have heard the law says, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. So that's the Old Testament. But I say, so here is Jesus teaching from the Sermon on the Mount, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. In that way, you'll be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. Now, some of us might think, well, Craig, I'm not quite there yet. I just don't feel that yet. And you're not going to feel that. Right feeling isn't going to lead to right thinking. Right thinking may possibly in the future lead to right feeling. And I just want to encourage you, like this week, I know this is going to be tough. This is going to be a big step for some of us. But if someone has really hurt you, and if someone is just like limiting your today, pray for them. Jesus tells us to do it. Give it a try. I think one of the things you're going to see is that God is going to soften your heart. I think one of the things that you're going to experience is God is going to help you move on. You're not praying that this person wins the lottery. You're not praying that this person has this great blessing. You're just praying that you can understand what happened. You're praying that despite your misunderstanding, that somehow they're still a child of God, and the two of you are going to move forward either separately or together. Now, the next thing I want to just read Colossians chapter 3, verse 13. Make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember, the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. Now, yesterday on my Facebook account, I needed some help, and I was really curious about what people were going to say. So I asked a very simple question. I said, what is more difficult for you? Is it more difficult for you to forgive other people, or is it more difficult for you to forgive yourself? Now, I coached a soccer game, went down to Nebraska City and picked a bunch of apples. Came back home, it's like 6 hours later, there's like 70 people had responded to this. So Benjamin, being a preacher's kid, I made him go through and tally it up. So there's like 61 people that said something. There's like 5 people that said something. He says, yeah, there's like 3 people that didn't even answer the question. They just babble on, talk like you, and don't even say anything. So seriously, like 90% of y'all who replied to this, what do you think you said? You said it's tougher to forgive yourself than it's now. 10% said it's tougher to forgive other people, and that's fine. I mean, maybe you've been hurt at a level that most of us have never been hurt before, and we totally understand that. There's no right or wrong answer to this question. But most of us are saying it's tougher to forgive myself. Now, I want you to know this. God has forgiven you. Now, do you believe that? Do you believe that God has forgiven you? I think you do. I think you believe that. God is offering you, and God continues to offer you forgiveness. God is doing and will continue to do his part. But there comes a time where we have to do our part as well. Now, this is like 15, 16 years ago now. I was a youth pastor in Atlanta, Georgia. I was a full-time seminary student at Emory University, and Amber was working for a domestic abuse shelter for women. So at this time, I was a part-time youth minister and a full-time domestic abuse advocate, and we're just raking in the dough. I mean, we had more money than what we could possibly do with. And one of the things you do when you live in Atlanta is you get in car accidents. That's just what you do. They got all these roads and hills and crazy people and interstates and connectors and bridges and overpasses. So I got in an accident that totaled my car. Someone collided, and it's not a good thing. And so for a while, it was really cool. Amber was like my chauffeur. She'd take me to school, take me to whatever. And this guy at the church, he called me up. Actually, he saw me in person one Sunday, and he said, Craig, I would like to give you my car. I knew this guy. I knew that he drove a BMW SUV, like one of the first ones back in the late 90s. And I said, are you talking about the BMW? He goes, oh, no, I got this old Honda Civic in my garage. It's like 20 years old. It's got like 187,000 miles on it, but it runs. I'm like, gosh, I don't know if I can take your car. That's really generous. I said, well, look, we're going to work on this insurance stuff, and let me just get back to you, And I was thinking that was going to end the conversation. So he calls me up a few days later and says, hey, really want to give you this car. It would be a blessing for me to take it. Will you take the car? I said, well, we're almost done with this insurance stuff, and I'm not sure what we're going to do. Kind of maybe see you in a few weeks, and we'll talk about this. And so in the South, they really know how to treat the pastors. You drive up to the church, and the pastors got their own special parking spots right next to the church. Actually, I didn't like that, but they did it. So you got the senior pastor, the associate pastor, the missions pastor, the music pastor, the children's pastor, the youth pastor. That was my spot. And we're going to pull in there, and guess what? There was this light blue Honda Civic. 1973 was the first year Honda imported cars into the United States. It was in my spot. So I go to the box. There's some keys in there. There's a title. It's got my name on it. Said, full tank of gas, like 7.5 gallons. And, the oil had just been changed. Now, I think that, that's forgiveness in us and God. He's just going to keep pounding us. He's going to say, I got this thing for you. It's paid in full. Jesus took care of that. Instead of walking and being carted around, I got a better idea. Just let go of that past. This is why Jesus came to the world. And one of the things that's really, really interesting is I love this story. They called Jesus, they lowered Jesus into this house. And this person was in a wheelchair. And they said, Jesus, we want you to heal this person. So everyone in the room was thinking what? That Jesus is going to tell this person to get up and walk. And you know what Jesus tells the person? He said, your sins are forgiven. Because ultimately, that's the healing that you need the most, and it's the healing that I need the most. So Jesus, he took the bread, he blessed it, and he broke it, and he said, friends, this is my body that has been given for you. When you eat of this, do so in remembrance of me. And I want you to remember Jesus that was dropped into that roof. And he looked at that man sitting in the wheelchair, and he healed him by saying, your sins are forgiven. And likewise, later in the meal, Jesus took the wine, he blessed it, he gave thanks, and said, friends, this is my blood. It's the blood of the new covenant that has been poured out for you in the forgiveness of your sins. When you drink of this, do so in remembrance of me. I want you to hear those words one more time. This is my blood. It's the blood of the new covenant that has been poured out for you. Not just the pastor, not just the person who comes here every week, not just the saint, not just the donor. This has been poured out for you and the forgiveness of your sins. Now, I just want you to think about this as you come forward today. Just look at this one question. What would your life look like? What would your life look like if you could totally live as a forgiven person? You know, all the junk from the past, you say, that's the past. I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to move on. What would your life look like if you could live as a forgiven person? So let us pray.